Next we're just turning up 1.5 centimetres of the front section of the bodice at the bottom there. It'll make it easier later on if the pins were on the outside of the bodice and not on the inside, but we're just going from the side seam right to the point, like so. Okay, you don't need to worry about this end bit here where your fabric is going to be turned, because that will be tucked up inside later. Okay, I'm now getting the fabric ready to cut my skirt front, but what I would like to do is, where possible, line up the flowers that have come along the back of the dress, and I'd like to continue that line into the skirt fabric. So I've been searching for a pattern match, which I have found. This is the one on the sack back, this is the one on the fabric I'm about to cut, and there is my waistline. So if I go up about 1.5 inches and then cut it across, I know that when I come to put it together, my purple flowers there are going to line up. So you've already done your measurements for your outer petticoat to find the side measurement, going from the side down to the floor. So that is the measurement we're going to use for this length of material, and I want to allow maybe 2 or 3 more inches onto the bottom of that to allow for an M. After you've cut your length of fabric, I'm now going to cut it in half lengthways down to the floor. And I've just attached my first pin. I've lined up my roses with the right roses, and hopefully it should be about 2 inches above your waist there before it starts. So put a pin in there, and I've also turned a 2 centimetre hem. Okay, now that I've got my height on the side, I can now go down to the bottom and I can turn up a hem to where Tracy wants it to be. So that's ready for the next stage after that. Then if we come along to the front, I will turn a 2 centimetre edge in. That will become the front seam. So if we just go up here now, get the level on the floor and then pull the material up and pin it until it's in the right place. It's at the right height for you. Okay, it's going to be a little bit hard for me to video and do a pleat at the same time, but I'm going to do a double pleat backwards to the seam of about 1.5 inches. And that's my double pleat done. Make sure that they're level at the top and they meet down at the back seam there. I'm now going to put in quite a big pleat just in front, and I've got to manipulate that, so you have to forgive me for not being able to record and do this at the same time, but there will be 2 double pleats towards the back that will pull the front flat. Okay, don't worry about the pleat coming all the way up here. That is how it lays flat when you make your pleat. The idea is to get 2 flat pleats just to the front of the side seam. At the top of the edge of the bodice here, with your fingers you can just feel the bodice edge underneath the fabric. So what I've done is I've put a line of pins that match up with the base of the bodice. So what I'm going to do now is just draw a line in marker about 1.5 centimetres above those pins, and then we'll be taking the whole dress off and I'll show you the next stage. I've now carefully detached the front skirt. As you can see, these are my original pins that line up with the bodice edge, and I've now cut all of this excess off. This is now going to be put up inside the bodice front. Okay, we're here on the side seam, and the first thing I'm going to do is butt this up against the previous pleats and make sure that my flowers line up with each other. You want it as close as possible without a gap. I'm just going to put a pin in there. Harder than it looks. Okay, so now that is butted right up against the previous pleats and my flowers are lining up. This is the side seam of my bodice, and this is going to have a seam turned, and then it will be attached to the back bodice. So I'm going to allow for a seam, so I'm just going to turn that, and where I've got my line that I marked, I'm just going to overlap that like so, and just go a little bit over the fold. That's okay to do that. This is really just for a fitting at the moment, and then I'm just going to put a pin in there to hold it. And now I'm going to attach my bodice along the front, tucking up my skirt inside up to my marks. Tuck the front up inside. It might be it's a little tiny bit too long, so I'm just going to adjust that side seam to fit it in. Just make the side seam a bit wider, and then it can tuck up inside your bodice. A bit fiddly. Now you can turn your bodice front, and there you go, that should fit quite nicely. Okay, well, after all that pinning, this is what the inside looks like, and you'll note that I've got a couple of flaps there from the bodice. These are going to be a bit too bulky to tuck up inside the bodice itself, so what I've decided to do is just leave those flat, and from the front that is what it looks like. Okay, putting your front bodice on a flat surface, push the fabric backwards, and you're going to turn a seam of about 1.5 centimeters, and it is a slight curve going down to the bottom, and then you will do a turn seam at the bottom there. Mine is going just past the pocket slit there. I've just pinned that all down for now. I'm going to give it a fit on Tracy, make sure it fits okay, and then adjust any pins if I need to make it tight on her. Okay, this is my final fit for the bodice. Tracy seems happy with it. Right, Trace? Oh, good. So I've got them pinned, ready for hand sewing. And remember that when I was putting my arm around the back here and flattening out the fabric, well, I've readjusted that and I've put my pins in where I need them to be. So that's ready. Now I'm going to pin down the side seam. Remember to leave an opening for your pocket hoop on that. I've pinned up the hem that Tracy's happy with, so that's ready for hand sewing. And I think that's about it for now. When we come to sew up the pocket hoop, right at the top here, the first inch or so will be sewn together to give it a bit of strength, and then I've put a pin in the seam at 10 inches, and the rest of the dress down to the floor will be sewn into a seam. When you come to hand sew your bodice down to your skirt, you will only be sewing the bodice to the skirt, not the back. So make sure that your back is straight and out of the way so that you don't sew the two together. So you'll be sewing the front first, and then later on you'll be sewing the back to your skirt. When you get to the top of the pocket seam, sew down about an inch. You can go over this 2 or 3 times to make it sure it's strong enough, but you only need to go through the first layer on the top. On the inside now, you can turn back your bodice lining and then catch stitch it just on the inside so that it doesn't show through, and you only need to sew as far as the pocket seam. Okay, this is the inside of the bodice, and Tracy is now hand sewing the inside liner to the fabric. We've just put some pins in there to hold it up out the way, and you're taking a bit from the fabric and then a bit from the liner. Don't make your stitches too tight because you don't want them to pull. And do that all along to the side seam. For the pocket slit, we've measured down 10 inches from the top, and then you'll do a seam all the way to the floor. Whether you want to do it the old-fashioned Georgian way and hand sew it is up to you, but we have used a sewing machine. What you will then do is, where I've turned the seam, that needs to be whip stitched back on both sides of your pockets. Okay, we're now going to tackle the inside of the pleat at the back. Remember where I put those pins and I said I'm going to leave this till later? Well, later has arrived. This is the back of the bodice, which Tracy will show you, where I put my pins, and the stitching line I'm aiming for is just to the top of the pins on both sides. So if Tracy turns that over, she's now going to be doing the stitching for me, and she's going to do a prick stitch, which means that she's come up from the back and now she's going to do a small stitch down through all the layers through to the bodice, and then coming up about 2 to 3 millimeters further forward of the last stitch, and then she's going down and doing a tiny stitch, and she'll do that as far up as she can that is comfortable. Right, mistake made, but hopefully you'll be able to correct that mistake before you make it. The actual outcome of making the sleeve hasn't changed at all. It just meant that I had to go back one step to correct what I should have done, and that is with the lining strap. I should have connected that to the bodice first before I even put the sack onto the back. This should have been made up as a complete garment, and I completely forgot that it's supposed to be connected first. So even at this late stage, it can be corrected. And what I've done is that I've taken apart the shoulder strap and just cut that off for now, and then of course this will have to be sewn to the back of the sack there. I've just put some pins in for now, but it will have a running stitch put across there just to hold it in place. And then putting the sleeve in will make sense to me, because up until this stage, when I had the whole thing wrapped in fabric, I couldn't get the sleeve in properly, and I was wondering why I was hitting problems, and that was it. I hadn't made the strap into a separate item. So this is just to show how it should have been. So if you can correct this mistake first, then it'll make it a whole lot easier for you when you get to the end.
Moving on now to the sleeve. This is my sleeve pattern. You can see it's slightly squared off at the top here. It will have some little pleats towards the back. The front is slightly longer than the back, here and here. It also depends what type of sleeve you want and how long it will be. I'm going for elbow length sleeve, so mine will appear quite short. But then in different decades of that century, you can have a longer sleeve of a different style. Next, sew the seam on your sleeve.
Now we're going to set the sleeve in. Now there is the seam for the back, and you're not going to be following that. The seam of your sleeve, which is here, starts about 2 centimeters forward towards the front of the bodice. So you'll pin that into place. I'll just find it. There you go. Pin that into place, right side to right side. And now you're going to pin your sleeve into your armhole as far as it will go, and then you're going to go from the bottom again, and you're going to pin the sleeve in that way. Okay, we've now pinned our sleeve into the armhole on both sides. If you find that you have a little bit of material left over when you come up here, don't worry about it. You're only going to be sewing as far as your fashion fabric on your bodice at the front and at the back. So now we're going to put a running, well, you can either do a back stitch or you can run it through your sewing machine, depends what you want, and that's putting the sleeve in. Right, don't worry about anything being too long, because this is all going to be attached to your bodice shoulder strap. So get a nice clean edge. It doesn't matter if it's too long, as I said. Try not to pin it to bitty. And then work your way across the top of your armhole. Pin that, oh, sorry, attaching themselves to me now. Pin that on. What you're doing here is you're allowing about 1.5 centimeters of your bodice strap, and you're just covering that up like that. Now we're getting towards the back, we've got to start putting our pleats in. Now I've got to fit in 3 small pleats at the back into this space. You might have to jiggle it around a bit for your pleats to fit. If you've got to undo it again, then fair enough, you've got to do it. I just happen to be finding pins that are blunt. And fit in another one about there. And we should be able to fit in one last one underneath. As long as you're taking all the material, that's all that matters. Like so. I'm just going to pin that to the bodice for now. And you should end up with something that looks like that. Just pin that down so you can see it's flat. Okay. I just want to make sure this is going to be secure on the bodice. So what I'm going to do now is take the dress off, and I'm going to put a running stitch or a tacking stitch across the top there, just to hold the sleeve in place and the pleats in place. Now we're going to measure for the top strap out of your fashion fabric, and Tracy is very helpfully holding on to the tape measure here. Where you have your line of fabric across here, take your measurement about 3 centimeters past it, and you're going to be measuring up over the shoulder and down to the back. And where you can see the fashion fabric finishing here, add another 3 centimeters. So I'll make mine 25 centimeters. And for the width measurement, take it about 2 centimeters past the bodice front and about 2 centimeters back where your sleeve meets. So that makes mine 9 centimeters. So you need to cut an oblong of fabric to that size that you've measured. Okay, this is your strip of material, and we're going to go a couple of centimeters past the front, like so. First of all, turn a seam of about 1.5 centimeters and then lay it against the edge of your bodice, like so. I'm just going to pin that in place. Oop. So then we'll go to the front, and we're going to turn under the edge so it covers this fabric at the front, and I want it to line up just about the same as the one on the other side. Just turn a seam under and put a pin in that. I'm going to do the same with the back. Except this time it's going to be at an angle. If you can see the one that I put on before, we have an angle here from the top of the sack to where the sleeve meets. I want to make a turning that is going to fit that and have the right angle. So just turn that, and you might need a little bit of manoeuvring to get it right. I think that looks about right to me. Just put a pin in the corner. Bit fiddly. Okay, right, we'll go back to the front. And now we're going to turn this edge in. I'd like it to meet this edge here where the sleeve meets. So turn in that until it meets up. Might need a little bit of messing about, but that is what I'm aiming for. I'll just put a pin in that. Like so. Then I'm going to turn an edge so that you cover up all of this mess that's on the top of your sleeve here right now. Left a pin in, don't need that. So, and then we go to the back, and this is where we need to sort out your angle. So you need to turn under a little seam and turn under a seam at the edge, and we're just checking it against this one here to make sure it looks right. I'd like it to meet there, so I'll take it in a little bit more. Turn that under. I'm aiming for that point there. That should be it. Right, I've just managed to put a pin in there now. So the last job on this to do is to whip stitch it to the edge. You can either prick stitch it down there, or you just do a small whip stitch, and you're connecting the whole shoulder piece. And this is one that I did earlier. With pins in. Now Tracy is just hand sewing the patch of material over the shoulder. She's going to just whip stitch this down along the edge and then sew it all the way around. Right, we forgot to say in the earlier video, when you're coming in to sew this strap down, don't sew down the end bit just yet, because we want to do the fill-in piece across the back of the gown. For your first measurement, you will need to measure from the armhole edge to the armhole edge over this side and add 3 centimeters. Where you've got your imaginary line there, go to the middle of the back and then take another measurement from that point up to the end, which is 4 centimeters for us. So you double that length to 8 and then add another 3 centimeters. So we will need to have a strip that is 11 centimeters wide by 29 centimeters long.
Okay, now you've got your rectangle strip. You need to measure 1.5 centimeters from the top and 1.5 centimeters in, and put a little mark there on the back of your fabric. You just see there, that's my mark.
Put a mark 1.5 centimetres across and 1.5 centimetres down on your piece of fabric on the wrong side. Then you need to line this up with your sleeve seam, like so. And then lay your fabric across, and you'll also put another mark on the other side. This has to line up with your sleeve seam, and just pin that in place. Try and see if you just put a pin there, please. 1.5 centimetres down. Okay, now you can either do a hand sewing job, or you can put this into your sewing machine, and you need to sew a line from there to there. Then you need to turn your corners in at 90 degrees on both sides, and then turn up your back piece like so. I'll just put a pin in that for now, just to hold it. Don't worry too much about anything that's left over on the side here, because it will be covered by your shoulder strap, which comes down along here, and then you will match that up with your seam. There you go. And then you have to now hand sew that down along here and just back up that seam a little way, and then that will be that job done.
Next you want to take that piece onto the back and turn in your edges on all corners, and then just whip stitch them down however you want, whatever's neatest, and that completes the inside. We're now moving on to the hem. Usually we would do a facing that goes all the way around the bottom of the dress, but I want to make mine in 3 parts so that we can take the back off, so I can wash it after it's been trailing through grass and stuff. So, but what you're just seeing here is actually just an extension of the dress turned in. So this is not the facing. There are quite a number of ways you could probably do this. You can do it any way you want, but I'm just showing you how I'm doing it for mine.
Okay, going on to the hem. Because we want to make this costume future proof in case we want to sell it in future, I don't want to cut off all of this hem. I'd like to keep it long. So ordinarily what I would do to do the facing is that I would put my facing piece right up against my hem piece. I would then sew 1.5 centimetres down, and then that would become my facing edge. But it's a little bit more awkward this time because I don't want to cut this off. So this is going to be my finishing hem at the bottom. So what I need to do is attach my facing just 1.5 centimetres above this line. So if I start from this edge, it needs to overlap 1.5 centimetres. Sorry, my pin slipped. And I'm going to put a pin where the hem is here. So if we work our way along, this has to be 1.5 centimetres above that hem line, and I'm going to put a pin 1.5 cm down on my facing fabric. It's a little bit awkward to do like this, but I don't have any choice. Like so. As I said before, if you're not going to keep any excess fabric, you could just put one against the other and then sew your hem. Right, when you meet your side seam here, just turn this over to meet it, and you can see it's 1.5 cm above my line, and just put a pin there to finish this section. Like so. So what you got to do now is just run a sewing stitch across where you put your pins end to end. Ironing up the facing now. This is the section at the back of the gown. We want to iron the hem, and what you need to do is to wedge fingers, I found that's the best way, and then manipulate it between your finger and your thumb so that you can just see a piece of the front fabric. Just turn to the inside and then give that an iron. And then what I've done is I've just been placing pins a few inches up just to make sure that my work is flat, ready for when we sew in the top section of the facing. Eventually you'll be able to move your pins further and further up your lining, so we're just going to pin the facing. So now we're going to pin the facing near the top onto the skirt.